We live in the age of information. We are basking in information. We're swimming in it practically. We are drenched. We are soaked in information every day. Our minds are like sponges, absorbing all this information. But what happens to sponges when they absorb too much? They become saturated. They can't absorb anymore. And this is what kind of is happening in a grand scale today's world. Today's people are very bombarded with so much information. We just are sick of it. And people have lost sight of their foundation, their approach at deciphering what information is good or bad. People are losing clarity about the world around them. People are becoming more distrustful of the science. They're becoming more combative online. Debates are increasing. Right? Why is this? Why are people debating so much? Well, it's because information is more present and more accessible, and people are more accepting of new ideas and new information, which is great. But the problem is, people are not understanding that there are some pathways that are better than others when approaching information and how to deal with it. Clearly, science is the best approach. Is having a scientific basis. Right? Because people online today don't even know what science is. We're not taught this in school. We're only taught in school that science is a boring subject where you're memorizing things not for a test, right? You're memorizing names of plants and trees, naming animals, and it's boring. That's not science, right? Science isn't just a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking about the world. And deeper than that, it can be a profound sense of gratitude and emotion and even perhaps spirituality. Because science does something that no other thing in the world can. And I'll get to that soon, but the point is that people today are lost. They're hungry for clarity, and science can provide that. Right? We live in a time where there's this ocean of noise. Right? There's a sea of noise, and the loudest one gets the most attention. It's hard to stand out in this sea of noise when you're quiet. So you have to make a lot of noise. This way you're heard. But typically now people are listening to some of these influencers. There's so many gurus now. There's the Jordan Petersons, the Tates, all these people giving people these ridiculous notions and ideas that are off track of where a scientific basis would have them go. There are a few people online that have gotten the most attention, and people cling on to those influencers. We beginning to trust these people too much, and we don't actually think critically or strategically about what we are inputting into our minds. We just kind of soak it all up, and whatever feels good, we are more tempted to just cling on to whatever feels good because we're just bombarded with information. And there's many other factors that go into this, but mainly people have lost sight on how to think critically. We've in some ways become lazy in learning, and the educational system's nowhere to be found to help. We are kind of lost at sea. We Who is telling people to think critically? Who is showing people how to think critically? Who is showing people what science really is? Who is really expressing what science is? I mean, science is literally the engine of prosperity in our world. From the phone you're using to the camera I'm using to the computer you're on to the chair you're sitting on to the road you drove to work on to your car to the plane you flew to the everything around you has basis in science and understanding of the world around you. So if you don't know how to use science, well, you're going to be lost in this sea of information or misinformation. So There are a few solutions to this, right? We have to face the facts. We are consumers of information. There's no getting around this or escaping this. We're not going to stop information from coming in anymore. It's the floodgates have opened. That's it. Pandora's box has been opened. There's no closing it. Right? Information is here to stay and will only increase from and going forward. And you know, Twitter has these notes, these community notes where people talk. That's failed. I think it's failed as well because there's your biases get in the way of those community notes. And there's many examples of this on Twitter where the community notes are wrong and or not just wrong, but also biased, right? And so we have to come to grips with the fact that we will never stop misinformation. We will never stop human bias. We will never stop the flood of information that we're being given. So, how do we solve this? Well, it all comes back to ingraining that scientific perspective into people. And it goes deeper than just understanding things or just deciphering information. Right? Scientific perspective goes deeper than that. So there's an incentive to share or uptake a scientific perspective. And what is a scientific perspective? What is that? Well, one aspect of it is understanding, having a general understanding of the world around you and understanding the basics of the science, right? Physics and math and chemistry and biology, the basics of those things. That's a part of it. But also another part of it is asking the right questions, right? Asking the correct questions and knowing what questions are correct. It's about having a strategy, thinking strategically and critically about what you're told. Another aspect of it is recognizing that all there are questions about the universe. Look, I am a very inquisitive person. I've always been my entire life. I've always asked questions, the most deepest questions you can think of. Right? Why are we here? What is reality? What is the meaning of all this? To purpose? And there are only questions. Like there's no escaping the fact that there are only questions. And part of science is recognizing that there are questions. And for the few answers we get, right, we do get a few answers here and there. Sprinkled in are some answers. But even from the answers we do get, the very few we get, more questions branch out from those answers. So there's an ever growing branching, a tree of questions and answers. It just continues to grow forever. So part of science, part of the scientific perspective is understanding that everything is questionable. Nothing is completely certain, and science never tries to achieve some absolute truth. Science always achieves or strives to figure out the approximate truth. What it tries to get as close as possible to the truth. And it always tries to make this blurry world around us a little bit more clear. And that's really what the scientific perspective is about. It's about making this blurry, ever obscure world a little bit more clear, bringing clarity to that world. And it's also about recognizing that our human faculties, our brains are flawed, they are biased, they are emotional, and those can get in the way. We can be lazy, we can be ignorant. And because of these things, in virtue of our laziness or ignorance, we seek the things that make us feel the best. We seek answers that make us feel good. There's confirmation bias involved. It's a huge part of this. And part of having a scientific perspective is at least recognizing that it's there. And it's built into science as a self improving mechanism that tries to weed out all that bias as much as possible. And finally, one of the biggest parts of science as a scientific perspective is understanding that it's letting go of that yearning, that human yearning to want to cling on to certain ideas territorially, wanting to have we have this territorial attitude, this tribal attitude towards certain ideas, and we kind of gather together behind certain ideas that make us feel good, and we want to fight for them. And part of the scientific perspective is to let go of that stuff. Scientists never cling on to one particular idea. If we do, it's only because there's evidence behind that idea. The overwhelming consensus points to that idea being true, right? That's the only reason why we cling on to ideas. Never because we have a superstition about it, or we have this want for it to be true. That's never the case in science, or it shouldn't be the case. So those are very important aspects, those foundational aspects to science, the scientific perspective that are needed in today's world, that people need to have when we find ourselves in this big river of information that we are thrown into as members of our society. So we need to be cautious, right? The point is we have to be cautious when we go online. We have to be more cautious and understand what information we're being told, what information, how to um, understand to how to measure the reliability of that information, how to understanding how that information was generated, the methodology behind that information, right? Um, and how the deductions and inductions are being made from that information, right? Because a lot of times I'll find myself talking to people who go, "Well, you just trust the study. You just trust the science, right? Did you do the experiment yourself?" Right. And that's often what I'll hear from people. Well, that's a foundational misunderstanding of what science means. When we look at studies, there's an entire methodology, right, that is displayed for the reader, for the viewer. Right. The entire point of a study is to show how they achieve those results. And if you're skeptical of the results, you can go ahead and falsify those results. That is how science is done. It's never about, oh, here's a piece of paper that says the thing, therefore it's true. We always need to recognize the methodology behind our experiments. That's what science is all about. So those are some of the biggest key requirements to having a scientific perspective. But a byproduct of this is there are only benefits, right? There are only benefits to this. And one of the biggest benefits to having this perspective is that it infiltrates every aspect of your life, from not just understanding things about the world on a physical or naturalistic basis, but also it inspires so much awe and wonder about everything about my life and people around me, from culture to music to art to relationships to careers to finances to politics. There are ways in all those categories which science can infiltrate. You can learn about those things through science in some way, in some branching. When you have this secular or inquisitive attitude towards the world around you, you begin to really absorb things more efficiently. You're able to extract much more richness, much more beauty from the world that nobody else can do, right? Because the world around us is full of richness, it's full of mystery and wonder. And having a scientific approach to this can make you realize all that. You know, as Carl Sagan said, right, the universe is full beyond measure of elegant truths, of exquisite interrelationships, of the awesome machinery of nature. It's true. The world is amazingly rich in all kinds of things. And a simple example could be somebody walking on the street looking at a tree, right? You might see just a tree, but I see a story, um, a being that took 13.8 billion year journey that uses the sun ray that traveled for millions of years down to this little speck of dust called the Earth, where it can use that energy, and that energy cascades into its cells and uses it to combine certain elements together and produces energy, produces sugars. That's profound. like somebody might look around and somebody might just look at the tree and go, "Oh, it's a tree." But look at the story behind it. Look at the value behind that. Look at the richness behind that tree, right? So the even that's a very simple example. There's so many more examples out there, but the point is that having that attitude towards things, even just a tree, let alone people, right? Like that just utterly transforms you. It utterly changes your entire outlook on life. And it just gives you so much appreciation and gratitude for things, for everything around you, especially life. Because life is such an amazing thing. Not because some now you might say a good example of somebody who's like probably Christian watching this going, "Well, I believe in God and I have appreciation because I say look at what God did for us. That's amazing." Oh yeah, you're right. That is a level of appreciation, but it's not the same level as the pureness and rawness that someone like me has as a secular person, because the very fact that you said look at what God did is just you inputting or trying to stick your egotistical notion into this world. You're trying to make it all about you. Oh, this God, look at what God did for me, as if everything in the universe is for you and that you are somehow owed all this. That's an egotistical thing. Letting go of that ego, that arrogance, that, oh, everything was here for me. God designed us. Look at what God can do for me. Wow. It's not that kind of appreciation. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a raw appreciation for things, one in which there is nobody doing it for us, but really things just are. And they just are this way. That's amazing in itself, right? The fact that all things around us are here by chance. People that are religious, they kind of shrug that off like, oh, you think we're here by chance? That's impossible. Well, what if we are by chance here? Wouldn't that make it more amazing and more incredible that we are here by chance, even by your own concession? Right? That the entire point of you saying or dismissing that it's by chance is that you think it's impossible. You think it's too crazy to be possible. Yet it could be, if it's true by your own concession, it's the most amazing thing that can be, but even more amazing than God's design. A universe where we just are. And I am just a collection of molecules, organic molecules that have assembled themselves in certain ways and a certain configuration naturally by chance, that by chance can yield this amazing experience of me talking and communicating and being conscious and being aware. All these amazing things, love, compassion, all those things can stem from naturalistic properties. That's profound. I mean, that's just profound. That's something that you just can't know or understand or grasp when you don't have a scientific approach, right? So the point here is that science is incredibly important for these reasons, and that's why I'm on social media, because I'm trying to ingrain that notion, not just to show people that God isn't real or religion's bad, but also to really shake that foundation, right? I'm trying to shake your foundation for what you believe and why you believe and how you believe these things. And if I can, it's like a house, right? If I can tumble the entire if I can crack the foundation and beat up the foundation, the entire house falls down, right? It's way more easier than trying to take off shingles from the roof, right? You're going to start at the top and try to, you know, that's what people do. People will typically leave religion out of it because, oh, religion's too personal. Well, that's the beautiful part about it. That's the beautiful part about attacking religion, because it is such a foundational thing for people, right? If you try to start somewhere else than religion, trying to change how people see the world, it's going to take longer. and it's not going to be as effective or efficient. We just don't have time for us to be that way. I think that shaking the foundation is how change occurs in the best way. I can't even describe. I can talk for hours about how science is important, and I'm sure many of you guys understand this. But like it's hard to really put it in words. I'm trying as best as I can, but there are just so many things about having the scientific perspective about the world and increasing our understanding of each other. That is so important. People as Christianity and Islam are dying, and they are dying in the Western world, especially. People are very tribal, so they're looking for things to cling on to. They're looking for another tribe to get into, right? And what we're seeing now is the anti-LGBT tribes, the ones where people are against transgenders. It's either male, there's only two genders, that's it. Those kind of people, or the conservative crowd, or the masculine people. They'll be masculinity supreme, right? Um, toxic masculinity. We're seeing that people are leaving when they leave religions. They're trying to look for the next thing to be the next tribe to join, because that's just how we are. And there's nothing wrong with that inherently. I think that that's part of being human. We are tribal animals. That's how we evolved. But look at how much hate and bigotry is involved in this because of their ignorance, right? And look at the solution, right? Look at how the scientific approach would be a solution to this. Because a religious person or somebody in that crowd is not willing to listen to what it means to be LGBT, to what it means to be a gender. They're not willing to listen because they're not asking the right questions. They're not even asking questions. They just go with what feels good to them. Oh, being a man is better. Being stronger as a man is good. Oh no, how about neurochemically? There's people out there who don't have that same gender, who don't fit into your definitions of what it means to be a man or a woman. Maybe they don't fit those definitions that you gave them in the first place. Oh no, that's impossible. Right? They don't even want to hear it. What's a woman? Right? The last that question. What's a woman? That question itself is ridiculous. There is no one objective definition for what a woman is. It depends on the culture, the context, depends on what environment you're in, what social environment. When it all depends on those things. So people in those tribes, in these conservative tribes, they want straight answers. They think binarily. They don't think on an additive basis, one in which they can see in multiples. They can see they have a very binary way of thinking. And that's something you can't have today, because one of the beautiful things about the world is that we're recognizing how complex we are as beings, right? Neurochemically, our brains are very complex. Sexuality is not black and white. It's a very mixed up thing, and there's lots of parts to it. Lots of working parts in our brain that give rise to sexuality, give rise to gender, give rise to these things. So if you're part of the crowd that thinks binarily, that it's either man and woman or nothing, or it's either, masculine male or not, or you're weak, or you're a weakling, or you don't exist. Well, I'm sorry, but you're dismissing all the complexities, all the nuance in how our brains operate. And this is one of the biggest problems of not having a scientific approach, because a scientific person would ask the right questions. They wouldn't be so fearful of the opposing side. They would listen. They would try to understand. They would try to form some kind of basis for why people act or behave in this way. What could be the answer to these things, right? They're asking way better questions instead of just saying, "Oh, you're wicked, you're evil, you're living in sin." You know, are they really living in sin, or maybe you just don't understand them, right? Maybe you're so caught up in this delusion that the world around me is bad and everything's bad around me that you forgot to listen to others, right? Maybe you forgot to listen because your eyes are so focused on this book. Your ears and eyes are focused on your pastor. You're not listening to other people around you. So another reason why science is important is because as we are engaging in these social ecosystems where we are beginning to recognize the complexities in which we all are part of and make up, we have to be more understanding of each other. And we have to understand these complexities if we want to live together peacefully. And that's really the crux of it, right? The crux of all this is that at the end of the day, understanding each other, right? Increasing our understandings of each other yields an increase in peace and compassion and acceptance towards one another. I would posit that a scientific perspective, a cosmic perspective, can make us deal more kindly with each other. It can change the way we behave with one another. It can give us a true sense of wonder and appreciation for things, a true sense of gratitude, and it can address the problems we're facing in a much more constructive manner. And at the end of the day, it can lead to a more peaceful, more prosperous, and loving world.